Hello, fellow YouTubers. Dream Kuma here. I'm kind of wanting to do a new thing. Thought about doing it. Gonna give it a shot. I might suck. Also, apologies for the nasaliness. I'm got a bit of a cold, but I had some cool ideas, and I wanted to kind of get them out. It's 10 books that any D&D player should really get. Now, any of these aren't really required reading, except for one, really, I'll say, because it's a core book. I'll try not to spoil this too much. The rest are supplements and extra stuff that you can read. I think there's even I've put in a few modules as well into this list. But I'm going to start this off with, this is stuff that DMs should read, gaze upon, maybe even get a cool idea for. My honorary number 11 is Dragon Magazine. And by proxy, Dungeon if you really have it. This magazine is probably one of the coolest things a D&D player in the 80s, 90s, and even mid-2000s, to the mid-2000s, pretty much until they stopped publishing them as magazines. This is just cool stuff to have. I mean, you can skim through some of this stuff, and here's magic items, short fiction. Some of this stuff's a little bit of a history lesson as well, and you can pull, change, whatever you want. Great ideas to skim from. Affordable as all get out. Very few issues are that expensive, and mostly because they came with something packaged in. Dragon and Dungeon, great stuff. Give them a read. Get them cheap. You don't have a good excuse not to get a dragon here and there. Now that's out of the way. Number 10. It's a core book for 2nd edition. Not my favorite edition, but it works. This book, probably one of my favorites, just for the sheer variety of what you can get out of it. And that would be the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Monstrous Manual, or as I like to call it, the big friggin' book. No monster manual before or since has really been this in depth. You've got just tons of stuff, from your brownies to your broken ones to your crocodiles to beholders. There's over a dozen different dragons, like a dozen different types of beholders, tons of different things, and almost all of them get like one whole excerpt about themselves, one whole page dedicated to one monster. That's actually kind of hard to come by. I think 5th edition harkened back to this one a lot, and it was a good idea, but this is still by far the more superior book in my opinion. And if you don't play 2nd edition, get it anyway. I ran this for Basic Fantasy, the very affordable OSR clone. Well, not really clone, OSR game that is pretty much free on their website, and you can get the whole book for like $5, but it needs monsters. Like there's a handful in the core book. This really fleshed it out. Monsters are easy to convert. The fluff is real nice to read. Great ideas. Great book. Number 9. This is not a D&D book, but it is a whole game. The Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game. Hankering for an ale from Drunkards and Dragons kind of helped me a little bit whenever he recommended this book. It's a great OSR game, but if you don't like OSR games, this is still really cool, because they have just cool artwork in here. cool details, tables for tons of stuff. It comes with 2 adventures already packed in the core book. You want to make a dragon in this? There's 4 pages dedicated to just random tables to make a unique dragon that can be from the size of a house cat to the size of a castle. Awesome, awesome stuff. Speaking of dragons, next up on the list, probably one of the best 3.5 books around, the Draco Nabokov. This is a book dedicated to just dragonness. Just the awesomeness and might of dragons. You get dragon golems, landworms, planar dragons. Probably one of the coolest dragon books around. To harken back to this, Dragon Magazine, issue number 300, actually had the planar dragons that were later on featured in this book. But why do dragons have hordes? This book has it. How do dragons care for their young? This book has it. How do dragon riders, work? This book has it. Magical dragon items. If you want to use a dragon in your Dungeons and Dragons, have this book. There's a second edition of this book. I didn't really like it. The 3.5 edition is much more complete in everything that you need. It can get a little pricey for a book, but it's worth the read. Next up on our list is an adventure, and a rather fun one. The Isle of Dread. This is probably one of the best modules that was ever really made for Basic Expert. It's also one of the most common and easiest to find. If you want to do a small adventure that's in a sandbox, that's not railroady whatsoever, this is it. Just drop them off onto the Isle, and they can fight T-Rexes and pirates all day. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to learn doing sandbox adventures, and you can even make a small campaign out of this. I really wish that they'd bring it back. Speaking of campaigns, the World Builder's Guidebook. By the way, does that not look like Christopher Lloyd? Somebody tell me that isn't Christopher. That's Christopher Lloyd. Great Scott, this book's great. World Builder's Guidebook. All you need is some dice, some paper, a pencil, and a little bit of time, and you can make your world. It doesn't matter what setting or what system you're using. You can use this with pretty much anything that uses medieval fantasy. And I don't know, if you a little creativity, you could use it in non-medieval fantasy and make your own world out of it, your own campaign world. Totally just cool stuff. And how to map them, how to do the geography, the sociology, the pantheons, all of that is in here, and most of it you can determine by die rolls at random. This is one that I think DMs need to read, and players should have whenever they first equip their characters. The Arms and Equipment Guide for 3.5. Even if you don't play 3.5, this is a handy book with tons, and I do mean tons of stuff. Everything from hirelings to boats to pets to extra equipment and stuff that you wouldn't think of off the top of your head, like poisons and masterwork items and extra technology and where it came from. This book has most of that pretty much right there, and you can dig a little deeper and find all of it without trying too hard. Only complaint I have about this book is they used the same art on the front, on the back. That's it. That's perfectly, you know, ear tint on my end, but perfectly good book. That's just worth every penny. On the trail of 3 and 3.5 books, Book of Owl Darkness. DMs need this. I don't care what edition you run. I don't care what your physiology is on bad guys. Read this. You'll give your baddies an edge. You can add drug use, demonic possession, the natures of evil, sacrificing to get power. Even like the Lords of Evil and the Nine Hells are in here, and it's well done. It's well written. It's not very immature for what it is. It's totally worth the read. The BVD, it's just a great supplement. I don't recommend players get a hold of this unless you're running an evil campaign specifically. Mostly because this likes to hide secrets, and you know, every DM needs their guide, and I think this is totally more of a DM's book than a player's handbook. Just because they're going to fight bad guys more than they're going to be bad guys, in most cases. BVD, worth it. Alright, the ending trail of the 3rd edition on 3.5. The Spell Compendium. An exhaustive, unique list of spells that players and DMs can just sort through to do all kinds of cool stuff. If you play 3rd edition, this should be a required reading. I think this should be like mandatory for players and DMs alike to have and use. Ugh. The Spell Compendium itself just has tons of stuff to use, and some of it's a little OP, some of it's a little crazy, but if you're not running 3rd edition, convert up or convert down, or make magical weapons that have these kinds of spell effects. Not too hard to make this stuff fit to other editions. Another 2nd edition book, and probably one that might get me some flack, the Book of Artifacts. I first found this book in its paperback form at a local comic book shop, and it was wonderful. I had to have it. It was just great. The DMG often lists, wondrous items, magical items, and how they work. This goes so much further than that in giving you campaign use for these things, giving you the history of the item. In some cases, it'll tell you where the item comes from, like certain campaign setting. There's stuff from Spelljammer in here, and stuff from, I think there's even a few things from Ravenloft in here. But, you can turn one or a couple of these items into a whole campaign on just maybe they need to destroy it, or return it to its rightful place. The artwork, it's rather not there often. Some of it's great, but it's kind of reused. Like Clyde, I think this is Clyde Cadwell's Baba Yaga. They got one in here for Vecna as well. Like, they have his hand and stuff. It's, the art's, give or take. But, the items just are so fleshed out in how to use them. That you just kind of have to just read it and get all kinds of cool stuff out of it, like Death Rock. The Death Rock is the evil relic of inky black stone, roughly the size of a man's clenched fist. When touched, the rock pulsates faintly, like the beating of a heart, and leaves the sensation of a warm, greasy moistness on the fingertips. The death rock exudes a palpable aura of evil noticeable to intelligent creatures. That's, okay. That's just your first paragraph out of the entire bloody page. Good stuff. Read it. Love it. Last but not least in this list, probably one of my favorite books that I ever bought, Dungeons of Dread. This is a wonderful tome of 4 adventures for AD&D that can be converted up and down. It has the classic kind of look, and you can find this on discount pretty heavily nowadays. I think whenever it came out it was $40. I picked it up for $23, $24. It comes with The Tomb of Horrors, White Plume Mountain, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, and The Lost Caverns of Sojkan. Why is this good for DMs? Well, for one, you got 4 adventures that are top rated and some of the best and most iconic in the history of Dungeons and Dragons. 2, you get to see classic dungeon design in a ton of different ways. What I mean by that is you can have the Barrier Peaks is a spaceship. The Tomb of Horrors is the local haunt of an ancient lich that's become something far more foul. White Plume Mountain is in a dormant volcano, I believe. And Sojkan has it's a cavern. It's a cavernous hill. It's just all great stuff, and it's worth reading just to kind of get an idea of how they did this stuff back in the day. Even some of the illustrations are crazy. There's a robot. Expedition to Barrier Peaks was science fiction at its finest. It's great. It's affordable. Read it. You need to. It's cheaper than buying all 4 of the modules separately, and it's in a nice hardcover format that holds up. Well, there's my list of books that are kind of needed. I'd almost say required reading for D&D to become a better DM. If you have any more that you'd like to mention, please mention it below. If you think I suck at this, downvote. If you kind of like the idea, upvote. I'm kind of new at this. Take care, everybody.